How are you? Good day. Colonialism has evolved. What a bold statement to start a video this afternoon. And I like to get deeper on what I mean. Colonialism has evolved. It is still present, but it is moving in a different platform or in a different manner. What we call post-colonial nations, or what we call national independence, liberation of Africa, is actually an evolved form of the same colonialism. It wishes to grant you uh, some rights or some easing of your pain, but not entirely eliminating all of it. So once your pain levels are reduced, you begin to have this feeling of freedom. But by and large, you are still oppressed. Speaking of Africa, more specifically, the driving force of our oppression is our natural resources. You need to understand what that means. When the British first believed that Zimbabwe was an El Dorado, a land filled with gold, the British Empire sent white men with guns and butchered black men and subjected them into a political system where they were enslaved by the British in their agricultural sector and mining sector. That was called colonialism because the people felt their resources have been taken away by an invading force. And then what we have now is the post-colonialism, where we had things like 1980 independence in Zimbabwe, where where the government face changed from white men to black men, and black people were allowed to vote, and they were allowed to go to white people's pubs. They were allowed to walk in town where they were not where they were prevented from walking before. So there is an easing of the pain, certain elimination of the whole ordeal of having your resources stripped away from you. Your resources are still not in your hands. They were not in your hands during the white regime. They are also not in your hands even during ZANU-PF regime. Hence, we had the land program in Zimbabwe in the 2000s. That was to address the fact that 20 years after independence, that was the year 2000, from 1980 to 2000, 20 years after independence, the resources were still largely controlled by the former colonists. Now, for all intents and purposes, they never needed to call themselves colonizers or even run a government. All they need to do is to have the control of your resources, that is, the extractive resources, and to profiteer from them. So whether you're a black man living in 1975 Rhodesia with working for the white bosses, or you are a black Zimbabwean in 1999 who still doesn't own their own resources, your fate is largely the same, except now that we can vote and we can go drink beer and sit in the same restaurants that were only exclusively white. The benefit of independence is largely very minimal, but it appeals to the flesh of the human being. It appeals to the idea that you too can do things that the white bosses used to do. But for all intents and purposes, you still do not own the means of your production. Now, that is what inspired the land invasions in Zimbabwe. They were brutal. Of course, it was war. Of course, they were brutal because it was war. I do know that we've got other British people who still are oppressing, or rather punishing Zimbabwe because of the land invasions of the 2000s, but yet forget that it was a war. Just like the very same land was taken by the white people through a brutal war. It wasn't through smiles, it was a war. Black people died. So in the year 2000, black people claimed their land. Some white people died. It was part of the war. Because of that, Zimbabweans have had to live with something, some fact of true independence. True independence is living without your colonizer. The idea that we keep looking to the United Kingdom as some kind of brother figure or father figure who is supposed to help us is really telling me that we are not independent. Because if you're independent, I mean, this is a simple English word. Independent means that you are not longer in need of the other. It means you are your own fully grown person capable of taking care of yourself. So if you're an independent nation, you're not going to be always going to be running to Washington, running to London to ask for help, running to the IMF to ask for help. I'm not saying don't go to the IMF, but largely what I'm saying is that if you say you are independent, you need to be responsible. You need to take care of your life and your own things. All right. To manage your own resources, your own assets. So ZANU PF, perhaps it is a mental thing, still cannot understand what independence is or cannot live within the state of independence. When our black people grabbed land from the white farmers, they were ill prepared for independence. In as much as independence sounds like a good thing on paper, in reality, independence is hard. To give you your freedom is to give you hardship. It's hard to be free. It's easier to work for someone else. Come on, take a look at workplaces. It's easy not to be the boss. It's easy just wake up in the morning. You're told you're working from 8 to 5. Okay, you're given tasks. You do the task month and you get paid. That's it. You don't care about other things. But become the business owner. All of a sudden, all other duties or responsibilities arise, and they need you to man up and stand your ground. Now, even with nations, you cannot expect these leaders with this extractive mindset to take the country forward. ZANU PF is largely filled with leaders that believe in extracting or expropriating. That's the word I'm looking for. They are simply expropriators of wealth. Whatever white people build, they want to expropriate for personal belonging. But they have got no capacity to build something new. Show me something that has never been done anyway, never been done in USA, never been done in UK. Alright. And begin to create an economic system that has never even been taught at the London School of Economics. Why? Because you are now independent. You are able to think outside the box and stop questioning Britain or what Britain is doing for you, but rather begin in your independent state of being to present ideas to yourselves and your own people on how you can restructure your own economy. As I said, Zimbabwe is an extractive economy. We're going to focus mainly on the two major economic front runners, which is the agricultural and the mining sector. Now, looking at the global ecosystem, now I want to show something here, that the world works like this. The world extracts natural resources from all over the world, wherever they extract them. Then the world produces them, produces products through what you call manufacturing. All right. After manufacturing, the next stage is consumption. Manufacturers sell to consumers who consume. So these are the three aspects, three divisions that I want to focus on. And then please bear with me. The first, I said, it is the extractive world. Africa is part of that extractive world where resources are extracted from Africa largely by capitalists. So when I say you must be independent, you must own the means of extracting your own resources. But largely in Africa, the extracting companies are usually European or American, and now they are becoming more Chinese, meaning that the wealth created from the labor, from the extraction, it does not go to the African, it goes to the foreigners. What the African does in this thing, in this instance, is they're just cheap labor, general labor force who are paid just enough to come back to work. So we need black industrialists, no, not industrialists, black miners and black agro farmers. So this is agriculture and mining extraction. The next stage, I said, is going to be manufacturing. The world has moved. Before, during the times of what we call colonization, manufacturing was done mostly in Europe. Germany, Britain, USA, they were huge manufacturing hubs. That's what led to the third industrial revolution. It really was an industrial revolution. So these economies, like the American economy, the British economy, were largely based on manufacturing of goods. All right. So the goods that they were manufacturing, they use some resources. So the resources that they had to use came from Africa. So that's the reason why Britain and other European countries colonized Africa for the purposes of having access to the resources that they would extract using their European companies. Okay, and then they will take the resources. Okay, after let me be slower. Resources extracted by their European companies using cheap black labor who is able just to work so that they can get paid enough to eat and go back to work for the white man. They never get rich, they never get to advance beyond just being workers. That's what the Europeans needed them for. So those resources go to Europe and they go into manufacturing. So they would manufacture goods. Uh, so their manufacturing industries were great, or rather supported the European and American economies. So they were able to hire their own people in their own manufacturing hubs, and those that were spending, the consumers, therefore the consumers are anybody who has entered into the consumption sector, which means it is the middle class, the upper middle class, the rich. Okay, and to some very little extent is the poor people. Of course, poor people who consume things like meal, cooking oil. Okay, so you are also part of the consumption, but really by and large, most of the consumption, it goes to the top, goes to the upper middle class, the middle class, and the upper rich. Now, so the whole world is designed for the upper rich, the very rich, the upper middle class, then the middle class. Well, the poor will have to do with whatever is left. So you see now that during colonization, during the 1900s to the 1980s or so, or 1990s, Europe has interest in Africa because they had to extract those resources. But now they had a transition as well in Europe and in America, what they now call globalization, when China opened up and they began to manufacture in China. Most of the American manufacturing has been moved to China, and even some of British manufacturing moved to China. But here's the thing, it might have moved to a physical country called China, but the capitalists themselves that were manufacturing in USA are still the very same capitalists manufacturing in China. So according, I told you that the world is designed for to cater for the upper rich, the upper middle class, the middle class. The rich and the upper rich, who are the owners of capital, who used the American political state, the American political system as a means of expressing their capitalistic ingenuity, decided that okay, now we no longer need to manufacture in America because it's now expensive. Then American labor, the paupers, the poor people, the ordinary Americans, they became to be too expensive. So, but then there was a large supply of cheap labor in China, over 1 point something billion people. The Chinese, so the American upper rich class, the European rich class could invest capital in China so that they can cause China to become this manufacturing hub. killing manufacturing in the United States and in Europe. They called it globalization. So it killed the general livelihood of Americans was destroyed, of ordinary Americans, ordinary Europeans, ordinary British people. So that's why a lot of these white Americans are just taking drugs. They do not know what to do because the the their capitalists have put them under the bus essentially. So that's when we get the Chinese and the Asian economic miracle. So it's a mix of a China being ready and the capitalists being ready to use China and Asia as a manufacturing hub. So now you see China has got a problem with emissions. But I understand China, of course, should have the highest emissions in the world because they're the ones who are producing for everyone else in the world. So there is manufacturing in China and not much in Africa. So in all of these things that I've said, Africa is left behind. All right. We are still having resources, but they're still being extracted. But now they're extracted by Chinese companies. That's why you see an emergence of Chinese in Africa. It's because now the manufacturing is going to China. So the Chinese people have become clever, seeing that capital from America is coming to China. They began also to participate in the manufacturing. So now we've got a lot of Chinese companies owned by Chinese people. Okay, something that they would not have done had European and American capital never been to China in the first place. We've heard the Americans complaining about how China steals their technologies. I wouldn't call it stealing. It's growing into industry. If you come to a place and then you are cooking beans in a certain way and you also like it and you want to cook beans the way that you do, it's part of growth. You might characterize it as stealing because you want to make a political point, but in reality I don't think that China is stealing. I don't think the word stealing is the right word to use. China is learning from American ingenuity and they begin to do the same, and they even improved on some of European and American technologies. And these are Chinese people, so they were able to ride the wave. Okay, the capital was first and foremost was white capital or European capital, but the Chinese were smart enough to ride the wave. In Africa, we've not been smart enough to ride the wave of extraction of resources. So when we extract our resources, it's largely these foreign entities. What has happened with our political leaders that they have been able to infuse only themselves in these deals. That's why you see the emergence of the riches of South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, also another South African billionaire like what's his name, Patrice Motsepe. These are black people that were able to infuse themselves in the capital networks of the extractive resources, but clever or not, I don't know whether clever or not, I do not know how to judge them, but nonetheless they benefited from it. The trouble in Africa is that it only benefited a few. They haven't been able to find a way of extending the beneficiation. Of course, ANC have tried things like BEE, triple BEE. You can argue to what extent they have worked, whether to a large extent or to a smaller extent, but we still have a long way to go with the majority of poor black Africans. Even in an industrialized country like South Africa, black people are still suffering. There's a lot of black poverty just going on, which needs to be addressed. Now, so so you see that we are still colonized, but we're no longer calling it that way. We're not calling it colonization. We're calling it independence. We are free. We're free to do what? Are we free to be the leaders in industry? Well, you might be told on paper that you are free to be leader of your industry, but you will face a lot of bottlenecks in reality that really are still telling you that you are black and unadvised to shut up and walk your lane, and they are white and privileged, and therefore you should be the one who will have the access to things. There is no law. This thing is very, it's very smart. Okay. There's no explicit law that say a black person is not allowed to do this. Only whites are. No, there's no law like that. Okay, but there is policies, and systems and tendencies that are set in place that ensure that at the end of the day, black people do not progress, white people do. Even if black people are excellent, you stay poor and miserable with the excellence. A white man doesn't need to be excellent. They just need to show up white with blonde hair. Opportunities are availed to those people. So that in itself is a form of colonization, because it speaks to other people coming into your land and being able to grab opportunities and resources while this you can't, and they come up with clever explanations, the validations, the things like what the DA likes to talk about, Mary, what do you call it, meritocracy. Meritocracy is a system where we say we want to employ only people with merit who have got qualifications. Of course, the only people with qualifications that are talking about, they are white, they are not black. And then you say, why don't black people also get the qualifications? Of course, the access to those universities are only given or easy to be accessed by white people and not the black child, even if the black child may want to. You understand? So at the end of the day, you are getting to deal with you get to a position whereby you need to balance the two. Of course, meritocracy is very good. Of course, you need qualified people, qualified engineers to run things like ESCOM, TrustNet. But at the same time, you discover that they are called they are made to be qualified or called qualified because largely of their skin color, and others find it very difficult to be qualified, to be called qualified, also because of their skin color. So to address that, you need to do away with meritocracy a little bit and say, okay, we are going to put these ones that have been marginalized. We know that they do not have this qualification, but because we qualify them, because even if they were fit to qualify, the system that we have created were engineered to ensure that they never qualified or never be looked at as those that can qualify. So the system is punitive to them because of that reason. So we recognize that there's an error in the system, not in them. Therefore, we will overlook meritocracy and begin to promote those that within our laws do not qualify. But we have come up with another system of identifying how we can qualify them. Then you get things like black economic empowerment, where someone gets a tender all because they are black. Then you say, "Oh, so it's racism, it's not racism. It's addressing a historical imbalance." Oh, and after interrogating and discovering that the the color of your skin has been the reason why you have been excluded. Therefore, for proper inclusion, the color of your skin would be the reason why we will include you. Do you understand that part? And it's not a policy that should last forever, but it's a policy that is meant to address things like colonialism. So, as we deal with freedom and decolonizing our mind and decolonizing Africa, we should recognize that decolonization is not a one-day event, but it is a continuous process. Nelson Mandela said, "Every generation has got its own fight." So Nelson Mandela did his part. Some people say Nelson Mandela sold the struggle, and therefore all the reasons that seem valid. But I will say it with him. Nelson Mandela did his first step. He did what he had to do given what he was in front of him. He opened the door for certain things to start to happen. He did not uh, fix everything, and I can argue that it was not his job to fix everything, but it was his job to open a certain door. Once they open the door, those that come after him, those that come after Nelson Mandela, their job and mandate, therefore, is to do what Nelson could not do. We've got people like Jacob Zuma that tried really with black economic empowerment and radical economic transformation, and that is the reason why he was removed from power. Jacob Zuma wasn't removed because he was corrupt. Everyone is corrupt to some extent. If we check corruption, we will discover that all of us are corrupt. But Jacob Zuma was targeted mainly because he was addressing colonization, and it never says comfortable with the colonizer, because the colonizer always seeks to maintain the status quo unless we get to a point of understanding that the colonizer is by de facto or by nature designed or at a position where they always want to 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 maintain the status quo. Status quo that Africa is a place where we extract resources. We use their labor to extract the resources, pay them very little so that they never grow and become like us, so that they don't become industrialists. Because the next thing that they are guiding is preventing us from being industrialists. Once you industrialize your economy, you are increasing the middle class. Once we increase the black middle class, what we are essentially doing is we are increasing the consumption class. Then black people become the consumers. I'm not going to call poor people consumers, even though, of course, I said they consume cooking oil, they consume soya beans, they consume meal. Those are basic commodities. I'm talking about the high-end products like washing machines, televisions, houses, double-story houses, luxury vehicles, tourism. That is the consumption of the middle class and upper middle class. So Africa has been colonized in this way. We allow you to have your own black government, it's fine, but we ensure that you don't enter the middle class. Stay there in the lower classes so that all you consume is just basic things like maize. Okay, we're just gonna farm maize for you guys and give you cooking oil and sugar beans. You will be fine. Leave the rest for the upper class. So industrialization is one way that you can put your people into the middle class. Access to the ownership of the resources so that the economy can be run by your own people. And and once we have extraction, industrialization, and consumption within society, money begins to circulate within your society. That speaks therefore to the improving of your financials, your financial services sector, your banking system, the way that you regulate your currency and lending within the economy is critical in maintaining an economic ecosystem that is transformative and truly independent. In this case, your economic system must be independent from sanctions. What we learn from the sanctions, American and European sanctions on Zimbabwe since 2002 to now, is getting to a place where we have to formulate ideas on how we can withstand those sanctions. It's very simple. It's independence. And I told you, independence is a responsibility. You actually do not want to be independent. You want to be dependent on the white people. But if I give you independence, you need to be ready to work. You need to be ready to carry the weight, because independence is heavier than dependence. A lot of people get confused with the two. They always say they want independence, but they are lying, or rather they don't understand what they are saying. When they say they want independence, they actually want white people to give them free things. Okay, even those white people, they are independent. They've got no other country that gives them things. They have to carry the weight of the British Empire. It's very difficult to run the British Empire. It's heavy. So they have to bear the weight of their own empire. That's why sometimes when it becomes too heavy, they will have to look for slaves. Okay, they have to look for cheap black labor because it becomes too heavy on their own. It's hard to be independent. So don't always run or seek independence as if independence is a place where you're going to be free and enjoy. No. Independence is a place where you're going to have to work. You have to carry the effort. You have got to be managing. Okay. To, stuff will be demanded of you. More is demanded of you if you're independent than when you're dependent. Take a look at a child. A child is dependent on the parent. It doesn't work, but the child finds food. Okay, the house is clean, they get things done for them. But the parent has to go fend for those things. The parent has to work hard. Hard work, it comes with independence. So as Africans, as we're seeking decolonization policies, we need to recognize that we need to be responsible now. All right, we need to put effort. Sometimes putting effort without even being paid to understand. So that is a part and parcel of decolonization. Decolonization is not something that white people are going to give us. Decolonization is independence, which we ourselves will gift ourselves. Okay, the liberation struggles this thing that has been called the liberation of Africa, which I said is a change of colonization. What we've had, but Zimbabwe 1980, South Africa 94, Namibia 91, all of those things, they are opening doors or giving us an opportunity to be responsible adults as Africans. We cannot keep on complaining that European companies are extracting African resources and not uh, beneficiating in Africa. It's not their business. Remember, they're the capitalists. They will extract in Africa for profit, manufacture in China for profit, and sell in Europe and America for profit. It's not their mandate to beneficiate in Africa. They see no need for it. It's not part of their duty to do so. So if you have got a problem with unbeneficiated African resources, why don't you buy those resources from those companies, from those miners? Because they're there to make money. They don't care whether it's a Rio Tinto, or it's Anglo American, or the De Beers, or whoever. When they produce platinum and when they are selling it in the open market, they don't care who you are. You can buy it from them. They will not gonna say, "Oh, you are black. We're not selling to you. We're not selling our coal to black people. Or only sell to Chinese." No, they sell the coal to you. So if you Africa have got a problem with beneficiation, you are the one who's supposed to buy the unbeneficiated resources and beneficiate them. Okay, so if you're a government, then give subsidies, give incentives to your own local industrialists to beneficiate. You need to take the initiative, not complain to the Europeans, because it's not their duty to do so. By the way, it's not Europe's duty to industrialize Africa. Okay, that's one thing. That's what I'm gonna have to say as I land. It's not global capitalist duty to improve Africa. All right. So I'm not making this video to accuse white people. I'm just making this video to show you, to highlight what has been happening, what colonization has done, what it's all about. But in conclusion, I'm not going to bash the British, bash the Americans, bash capitalists, and ask capitalists to do what is right for Africans. No, I don't expect them to do that, and I don't even advise them to do that. They should carry on doing what's good for them, what's best for them. It is however, it is us Africans who need to recognize the architecture of global economy and global politics and figure out how we fit in and figure out how we can be beneficial to the capitalists. The capitalists must not come to Africa because we have bashed them harsh enough. No. They must come to Africa because they see how attractive we are. We need, of course, our resources are attractive. That's why they are in Africa, to extract resources. That's the only attraction that they see. So don't expect them to see things that are not there. Okay. Don't expect them, don't expect men to marry your unattractive daughters. Tell your daughters to bath and perfume themselves and look beautiful and put some makeup and put and smile. Men will begin to notice them. Do you understand? You cannot force people to love you. Alright. So what Africa needs to do is to position itself, is to transform itself, reconfigure itself. Africa should do that, not Europeans to do that for Africa. They've got no time for that. China has got no time to come to Africa and to rebuild Africa. This thing of saying we are not going to look to the West, now we're going to look to China. China is going to build Africa. Why? It's not their duty to build Africa. China's duty is to build China. Using what? Resources that are from Africa. Yes, of course, they will take resources from Africa. By the way, they're not taking them for free. They are buying them. Even the Chinese mining companies in Africa, they pay for their access to mine. We can talk about environmental laws, we can talk about labor laws, we can talk about taxes, but that's a separate issue. The issue at hand I'm discussing right now in this video is the fact that these European and Chinese companies, it's not their mandate to build Africa. We must stop asking Europeans and Americans and Chinese to build Africa. It's not their duty, it's not their mandate, it's not their aim, it's not their goal, it's not their duty, it's ours. ZANU-PF, as it claims to be an organization that liberated the people, that represents the people, it is their duty, therefore, to build Zimbabwe, to think outside the box and think about things like beneficiation, things about industrialization, things like improving or increasing our middle class so that we can have a consumption society, so that we can have money that circulates within our economy, so that we can have a banking system that actually functions, a stable economy, a stable currency. Those are the things that ZANU-PF needs to be doing, and I'm saying that those things are heavy, those things are hard, those things are not easy to do. So independence, since you keep on crying for independence, what I'm saying that independence that you're crying for is a very hard thing. It's not an easy thing. Dependence is an easy thing. Being a client state of the Americans or the British is very easy. Okay, you just bend over, they rape you, and you'll be fine afterwards. They will pay you 50 rand around, whatever they pay you, you'll be fine. It's easier. It's easier to be dependent. But if you choose to be independent, ensure that you are ready to put in the effort, because the effort is going to be needed for those that want to be independent. So stop being a crybaby, crying for independence, and once at the same time you are not ready to put in the hard work. Because I'm not going to lie to you and say that work is easy. That work is hard. It demands discipline. It demands to get rid of your greed, your corruption, to address corruption. Truly address corruption. Don't be a corrupt cabal that wants to take over government for the purpose of extracting public wealth for personal benefit. You will not be free. You will not be seeking freedom. Even those cabals in government, what they are actually dependent. These Dagwires and Nankakwas, they are dependent on the Americans. They have to bank that money in USA, in Europe. They are now dependent. They are now really they really becomes a bee. For the Europeans and the Americans, African leaders, African leaders here are now dependent on the American financial ecosystem, American financial and political ecosystem, because they have not been willing to put in the effort, and the effort is hard. People want to be in government so that they can sit pretty. No, you are going to be in government and go through pain of working hard. That's how independence comes. It means that you're going to be dependent on no one but upon yourself. It means you have to produce your own things. If you want to see independence, go to a rural life in an African village. For an African person in village to get milk, they will have to rear the cattle. Okay, they hate the cattle, feed the cattle, take to the water. They milk the cow themselves. Okay, and they go boil the milk themselves. All right, and they go and look for the firewood themselves. There's no electricity. You don't go like car in a rural area. You go to the bush, get firewood, make fire. The work is hard, but it's independent. That's why rural folks are usually shielded for many economic hardships, because their economy revolves around using the resources that are around their own vicinity. But they put in the effort in extracting those resources. Okay, we extract the firewood and they do the production. They produce the fire, they chop the wood, put the fire in the kitchen, and they are the ones who consume the food that they cook in the fire. At the same time, they even do the farming for that food. That is an independent ecosystem, and it entails putting in the effort, the work, the rural lifestyle. But we get to be lied to think that once you get to town, once you get access to political power, you think it's any different. You think political power gives you a position or place where you don't have to work, you just have to extract things. That's what our politicians are doing. They're extracting things that white people built. They're destroying ESCOM, destroying PRASA, destroying the Zimbabwean assets are destroyed by the Zimbabwean government, black government. Just like the ANC, black government is destroying everything that the white people built, because they think that political power, access to political power, is a position where they just have to take things for free and not work. It might take a generation or two. After some time, look at what Zimbabwe is. What Zimbabwe was in 1980 and what it is 44 years later. It's a travesty. And the ANC is taking the same route. And what I'm saying is that these black politicians need to understand that their behavior is the reason why I say colonialism has morphed into something else. We, therefore, as the new generation who recognize the failure of our own fathers, need to understand that to decolonize Africa takes an effort from us. Not an effort from white people, but an effort from us black people, beginning to be responsible with the way in which we manage our affairs. My name is Ngubani Zola, and I'm running for President of the Republic of Zimbabwe to replace the autocratic, despotic, evil man who is Etim Nangako. We need a new Zimbabwe. We deserve a new Zimbabwe. We deserve freedom, and we are willing to put in the effort to see that our project works. Have a great day.